It looks like Iran has seriously started mining the Straits of Hormuz. There'd been report they'd put in a couple of mines a few weeks back, but the Strait of Hormuz were largely unmined until recently. That's changed.
All right, what's going on, everyone? So it looks like Iran is digging in. There's been no movement, no progress in the peace talks or ceasefire negotiations. Instead, we have reports that Iran is stepping up their mining of the Strait of Hormuz, which is not great, exactly. I mean, yesterday we had.
It's not great for the world or the United States or anyone who likes cheap gas. Yes, it's not good for any of those. It does give it is somewhat okay for Iran because they are establishing deterrence against future attacks from the United States.
Three different incidents where the IRGC opened fire on commercial vessels moving through the Strait of Hormuz, and two of them were taken over. In fact, Iran released this footage here of the IRGC Navy taking one of those two vessels. This is staged, like it's the real ship that is now in the custody of the IRGC, like 100% it was taken. We know that for sure. Just based off of where these cameras were and kind of how this clip comes together, it looks like maybe they took the vessel, moved it off to the side, and then said, hey,
tankers are big ships, aren't they?
You know what we should do? Put together a good hype video showing how we did this. But either way, two vessels taken by the IRGC yesterday, kind of Iran showcasing their version of control of the Strait of Hormuz. Interestingly enough, this was brought up to the White House spokesperson Caroline Leavitt yesterday, where they said, does President Trump view this as a violation of the ceasefire? And she said, no. She said it's not viewed as a violation because these ships that were taken and fired upon yesterday by the IRGC were not Israeli ships and they were not American ships. Personally, I don't think that sends a great message in terms of freedom of navigation through the Strait of Hormuz. And now on top of that, we've got a number of mines, additional mines making their way into that waterway. Washington Post yesterday said, quote, it could take 6 months to fully clear the Strait of Hormuz of mines deployed by the Iranian military, and any such operation is unlikely to be carried out until the U.S. war with Iran ends. The Pentagon has informed Congress, an assessment that means the conflict's economic impact could extend late into this year or beyond. Real quick there. So they're saying once it's wrapped up, there's no more fighting, and the shooting has stopped, it is a 6-month peacetime operation to remove those mines. Demining is crazy work.
Yes, it is. And I want to just show you on Google Maps. What's being mined, not the entire strait, it's this area right here. Iranians are leaving this passage right here through this island, hugging their coast open, unmined. They're mining this main passage. Before the war, that's right here where they're mining, was where most ships pass. And with this big open space in the middle, a lot more ships can pass. Right now, since Iranians are letting very few ships through anyways, it doesn't matter as much. But it's a lot narrower. And so ships will only be able to go in at a single file if you take into account the mine section. So even if the conflict ended today, until this middle part is demined, traffic through the Strait of Hormuz will be bottlenecked. That means there'll probably be a maximum amount of ships that can fit through in a single day. It'd probably be, if I'm guessing, I'd say half of the pre-war traffic would be able to go through just because of the narrowed unmined waterway. And so oil price is still going to be high for a while.
Like, again, in a peacetime environment, it's wild. So the idea that this could take 6 months after the last shot is fired just gives you an idea of how long this could go on. They say a senior Defense Department official shared the estimate during a classified briefing Tuesday for members of the House Armed Services Committee. Lawmakers were told that Iran may have emplaced 20 or more mines in and around the Strait of Hormuz. Now, the Pentagon has asked for comment on this, and Pentagon spokesperson Sean Parnell said, quote, by deciding to publish these false claims, the Washington Post made clear that they care more about advancing an agenda than truth. Now, it's not just the Washington Post that's putting this information out. Axios today had another report where they say the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy laid more mines in the Strait of Hormuz this week, so during the ceasefire, according to a U.S. official. And that shouldn't be a surprise. We have U.S. officials talking about how we are using this time period, this ceasefire, to restock our ammunition and move additional assets into the region.
Oh, everyone knows that. We will move troops, move assets, move bombs into the region, move interceptors. We're restocking. They're doing the same.
In fact, just today, we got notification that the USS George H.W. Bush Carrier Strike Group has entered the CENTCOM area of responsibility. So we are doing that, and we understand and kind of expected that Iran would be doing something similar. Turns out one way that they went about kind of restocking and preparing for the next phase of this fight is laying mines in the Strait. The Axios piece continues by saying the U.S. military detected the Iranian mine laying operation and has been tracking it closely. Before this apparent uptick, experts estimated that fewer than 100 mines had been deployed by Iran. So now we got the Washington Post and Axios talking to this. And then President Trump today, it's very hard to take his statements and apply like what is happening or what is going to happen in the future. But we sometimes can read between the lines and get an idea of, whether or not other reporting is accurate or false. In this case, it's President Trump, I think, kind of verifying that there are a number of Iranian mines that have been laid. So President Trump in a statement.
Yep, this pretty much confirmed that he's hearing reports that they're laying mines.
Earlier today said, quote, I have ordered the United States Navy to shoot and kill any boat, small boats though they may be, that is putting mines in the waters of the Strait of Hormuz. There's to be no hesitation. Additionally, our minesweepers are clearing the strait right now. I'm hereby ordering that activity to continue, but
that's a little bit of a lie. Our minesweepers are, I'll get into that in a second.
A tripled up level. Now, my understanding is that we may have one dedicated minesweeper.
Nope, we don't. You see, in a stroke of genius, the U.S. Navy decommissioned its last 4 Middle East-based Avenger-class minesweepers in September 2025 in Bahrain. So we don't have, the U.S. military does not have any more minesweeper vessels. We got rid of them all, or not the dedicated ones. There's some that can dual purpose to clearing mines, but it's not our dedicated minesweepers. We have no more of them left. We decommissioned them all right before this Iran war. Wasn't that smart?
In the CENTCOM AOR, we have a couple other ships that have minesweeping capabilities, but in terms of that dedicated asset, I think we have 3 or 4, maybe. Don't quote me on this.
I'm going to quote you because it's not true. We decommissioned them all. We don't have any. 0. That's how many we have now. Anyway, I think that's enough for this because the important point is Iran is mining the Strait of Hormuz. Let's move on.
I don't believe the American Army and the American Marine Corps are prepared for modern warfare or prepared for modern ground combat. I don't think they're prepared, in this, I mean, specifically drones. I don't think they are prepared.
I agree. And the reason I agree is just looking at what happened with the Russian military as a result of drone warfare, of encountering drone warfare in Ukraine, the Russian army totally reorganized its units, its combat structure, and incorporated drone units into its its army at every levels. It did an entire overhaul, basically, of its army to deal with drone warfare. I have not heard anything about the U.S. Army reorganizing for the era of drone warfare, because there would be stories about that. I would have heard something about it by now. So I think that there has not been any major changes to our military to adapt to drone warfare. And so we are in trouble if this goes into any type of ground invasion.
Prepared, whether in terms of their equipment, whether in terms of their doctrine, whether in terms of their leadership or their culture, to fight a war with drones. I just don't see it at all. Even though we've been so heavily involved in Ukraine, I don't think any of those lessons from Ukraine have had an impact.
It wasn't U.S. soldiers fighting in Ukraine, and bureaucracies are creatures of inertia. Unless forces acted upon them, unless there's stimulus to change their ways, they usually resist change. And U.S. Army has not had to face drones anywhere in the world yet, and there has not been the necessary stimulus to override bureaucracies and change unit structures and adapt to drone warfare
among the American ground combat forces the way they should have.
And that is a tragedy and just an incompetence that it hasn't been.
Incompetence is also a hallmark of bureaucracy, including military bureaucracy.
Because it should have been from the beginning. And we've dabbled around a little bit of Secretary Hegseth has said several times, we're investing all this money, and in a year and a half from now, we're going to get 300,000 drones. which is meaningless when you're talking about the Russians make that many practically in a month, as do the Ukrainian side too.
Right.
That's a pittance, and you're talking
The small drones, that are used on the battlefield, those, yeah, tens of thousands get made every month, hundreds of thousands even. They're just really, really cheap, fast, cheap to make. I mean, they're not expensive hardware.
in years from now. How are these guys going to compete on that?
And just let alone how do the American Marines and paratroopers put on an island prepared for their arrival by the Iranians, going right into Iranian strategy. The Iranians, guys, the Iranian foreign minister said on NBC on Meet the Press, he said, we want the Americans to evade. That goes right into our war plan. I mean, so just
Yeah, in the era of drone warfare, both sides takes heavy casualties. And if one side is very elite force and the other side is a less elite force, that doesn't matter. It's still both sides taking heavy casualties because cheap drones don't discriminate.
that should take it off.
In other words, it'll hurt us, the side, U.S., that has no appetite for war or casualties, far more.
Table immediately. But the idea of American Marines and paratroopers facing first-person view drones flown by fiber optic.
You know what? I actually don't. My primary concern is not what would happen when their U.S. troops are on the ground on Iranian soil. My primary concern is how do we get those troops there? Because boats are slow and they've got a whole bunch of anti-ship missiles and drones all across the coast. So getting any ship close seems dangerous. And helicopters, that just a small drone can take it out. I just worry if we have like a bunch of helicopters going in, Black Hawk helicopters, swarm of drone takes out to intercept them. Does a single helicopter get through? I mean, we could have catastrophic casualties before we ever get a boot on the ground in Iran.
The cable, which we know they have. They've gotten this stuff. They've learned it from the Russians, but we've seen them use it. We've all.
Problem is, you can't bomb a lot of other defense, like anti-ship defense and anti-air defenses. You can identify and you can bomb ahead of time. But the thing is, with drones, small drones, all you need is a foxhole. A small foxhole soldier huddled on the ground in that bunker. He gets word that U.S. helicopters coming in. He flies the drone right out of a tiny hole that is impossible to see by satellite, and we might have lost a helicopter right there. There's no way to preemptively, like, bomb ahead of time to clear the area of FPV drones. No, because you just can't find hidden foxholes and bunkers where the drone operators are lying in wait.
All seen the videos of the drones, fiber optic drones flying around Camp Victory, as well as the embassy compound in Baghdad. I mean, so how are American Marines and paratroopers equipped? How are they been trained? Does the leadership understand? I just saw a big story the other day about how the Army is introducing their newest version of the M1, as well as their.
And it's been over a month and a half now since this war started. So I guarantee you that any place that we might land troops for a land invasion, they have by now a significant contingency of drone operators waiting, just salivating at the chance to use their FPV drones on us.
Replacement for the Bradley to the 1st Cavalry Division, and just the way I read that, I just got this feeling that this is what the generals want. These are the guys who grew up with you, Danny, right? And they're still in the mindset of defending the gap against a Soviet armored corps, right? I mean, like.
Yes, the old paradigm. That's how the Russians were geared to fight at the beginning of the Ukraine war. But they changed everything, completely reorganized, because war will force that. It may take a debacle in Iran, but eventually the U.S. military will adapt too. But I fear it's going to take dead U.S. servicemen before we learn the lesson and really start adapting to drone warfare.
they don't have that in their heads. And so I fear, and I wrote about this. People want, more my thoughts on this. I wrote about this on my Substack a few weeks ago. I titled it "Reinforcing Failure." And the problem you'd have then if you do put Marines or paratroopers onto Karg and say it goes bad, well, because of the distances that are involved here, how do you reinforce them, right? How do you resupply them? How do you evacuate them? And then the whole other issue,
those are all good questions, but the first question you ask is how do you land them? That's what worries me. Like, yes, resupplying or evacuating them is hard, but getting them in that's the first point of failure that I don't see an easy solution for. I don't think helicopters flying in, because, like, for example, when we rescued the pilot, that was not somewhere that the Iranians were expecting us to fly helicopters. Now, a helicopter that's flying high up and fast is not vulnerable to the small FPV drones. They can't match that speed. But if you're landing troops, like along a beach, like if you say this island, for example, flying helicopters to land here, those helicopters need to slow down and drop down all the way very close to the ground to land their troops. And when they do that, any drone operators that have FPV drones standing by, they just fly them right into the helicopters. It takes very little time to get an FPV drone in the air. So a lookout spots helicopters coming in, they can start putting FPV drones up. And I figure, yes, they'll be targeting troops with that, but I think they'll be targeting any helicopters or boats bringing in troops before that. So it's very dangerous.
The evacuation in a minute, but we've seen what we should expect from Iranian air defense systems against low-flying aircraft, against helicopters with that whole Isfahan.
And last point, when we were going after the pilot, that was deep in Iran. And I'm sure of course, Iran has most of its FPV drone operators deployed at Karg Island, this island, like naval base over here, at the coast, at places where we'd launched a major ground invasion. So we might have been lucky during that pilot incident in that, and I think that they undoubtedly changed that afterwards. They're going to keep some drone operators deep in the territory for if we lose a pilot again. And if that happens, U.S. troops will face drone warfare. We just got lucky during that pilot incident. I didn't really think about it at the time, that this was so deep in Iran that drone operators that they have trained were probably along the coast. And so we didn't really feel the threat of FPV drones during that operation.
Thing a couple weeks ago. So why wouldn't that happen as well on some place like Karg Island? And you'd have a force there that would be dependent upon not just insertion, but reinforcement, resupply, evacuation from those same very aircraft that the Iranians have already shown a great capacity to shoot down if we put them in front of them. But then there's a question that is the political one. Say you put Marines and paratroopers on the
political one is this is a very unpopular war, and we can't afford to take any significant casualties without it just becoming unwageable. And the American people will demand an end to it. 1,000, for example, U.S. deaths, that'd probably be too much. That would be enough to completely turn the United States against this war. And if you can't even take 1,000 casualties, how can you really wage war or a ground invasion?
Karg Island or whatever other piece of Iranian real estate you want to talk about, and it goes badly. Is this administration going to pull them out? Right? I mean, is it going to admit that this is a failure, or are they going to reinforce that failure? Is this going to be case on? Is this going to be Gallipoli? Right? Is this going to be like in Ukraine with Krinky? I know we talked about that with that battle near Kherson. Right? I mean, so is that what this is going to become? So I think what you'd see then, if anything, in terms of these Marines or paratroopers being used.
I pray to God that someone is telling Trump all this. I'm sure there's people that know it, but Trump is not in a good mood lately for obvious reasons. His presidency is ending. And he has no good options. If he does land invasion, like everything we discussed in this video, there'll be hundreds of dead U.S. servicemen, and it'll be a fiasco. If he does a bombing campaign, the Gulf goes up in flames, and you have $200 oil for the next 3 years at least. That isn't, again, he's finished that way. And if he does nothing, well, the global economy slowly collapses around him as the world slowly, inexorably turns against him. He is screwed. His presidency was over the moment he bombed the supreme leader. He just didn't know it yet. Well, I think let's move on. Just wanted to highlight that, yeah, we're not ready for the era of drone warfare.
Force Iran.
Alex, we're no, this is probably a funny time for you to watch what's unfolding. Like it's like the worst case scenario for the US has unfolded.
Yes, exactly. It's why from the very weekend where we dropped those first bombs on Tehran, I was like, we are so fucked. And sorry for my language, but we were fucked. And I've just been watching everything play out in slow motion since then. I mean, nothing, not one thing has changed in my view of the situation. It's a month and a half later. It's, I think rather everyone's coming around to my position. I haven't heard from Asmongold yet lately on his feeling about the war, but it's been a while now. And he's smart enough to know that we're not winning this thing. I wonder how much his opinion has changed.
We're in a position now. The only things that Trump is negotiating for is an opening of the Strait of Hormuz, which was obviously open, and Iran's requesting lifting of sanctions and unfreezing of assets, and the nuclear program. So we're literally back to where we were.
Radio jamming exists. Once drones are bad enough, it'll be worth jamming all radio frequencies to take them down. The problem is now in Ukraine and on both sides, they're using the fiber optic drones. And we know Iran has fiber optic drones. There's been photos of soldiers, Iranian soldiers, like next to live fiber wire drones. And fiber wire drones can't be jammed. Jamming is useless against them. Yeah, they're like this. See, they're little drones with a little bottle underneath them and a wire coming out. And those can't be jammed. And Iran knows the U.S. is good at jamming and that type of warfare, electronic warfare. So they have these, and that is type of drones that will be used against the U.S. military. And they're real pain. I mean, Russians have one of the most advanced militaries, and they don't have a hard counter to it yet. They're working on stuff. We'll see. Maybe this summer, some people believe they might finally come up with some solutions to drone warfare, but right now it's just you just have to avoid them, and it's horrible for any troops operating in a region with these drones flying around.
In Oman, except Iran is in a stronger position.
Nice to have you here, Alvkun, by the way.
Right.
Strategically with the control of Strait of Hormuz. Not a good time to be on the American side.
He can lift the blockade that he has, the blockade of the blockade, and they can all sit down at the table and work it out.
Yeah, the problem with that is Trump needs a victory, or he's finished politically. He's already has the pain. It's already hitting the United States now, and it's only going to start hitting worse. The economic pain, and it's going to be being felt for months. Like the food prices, that's not even going to be really felt till next year. So, with all that economic payment in the pipelines, he needs a victory to sell this, or to even sell this as to the American people. If he got all Iran's nuclear material, for example, he could at least say, okay, yes, the economy's really fucking us over. We're in a recession with rising prices, stagflation, but we got Iran's nuclear material. They won't have a nuke. He at least has that, and that dulls the political pain he's under. Without that, if Iran gets sanction reliefs and comes away with control of the Strait of Hormuz, and everyone around the world recognizes, oh, the United States lost this war, then all he has is negatives. Not only did he fuck over the world economy, he also fucked over like U.S. military prestige, or aura of being invincible, that's tarnished. He just, his decision to bomb Supreme Leader looks absolutely stupid since it put us in a worse position. No, it's all negative. And he, with the midterms coming up, he gets killed. It's all bad for Trump. Surrendering to Iran is the end of his presidency, effectively. He'll be like already a lame duck president a year and a half in, or not even a year and a half in.
That's what Iran is waiting for. Lift the blockade of the block, which is not really a blockade. Iran is charging $2 million for a ship to pass, and it's not allowing U.S. and Israeli ships to pass.
The blockade is buying Trump time. He can be seen as doing something to pressure Iran, and he can say, "Oh, just wait, the blockade will work." It's not even been a week since blockade was set up, and he can say that, and it buys him time to say that, "Look, I haven't lost the war yet. I'm doing something," but. There's already reports of Iranian ships getting by, and even if the blockade was perfect and blocking all ships, Iran wouldn't fold. The blockading Strait of Hormuz is hurting the United States and Trump politically a lot more than it's hurting Iran. And besides, they've only been under blockade for less than a week. The rest of the world has been under blockade for a month and a half. So during that first month and a half, when Iranians were still exporting oil, they exported more oil than they have in years at a higher price than they have in years. So they made bank during that first month and a half. That means even if their exports are cut out now, they've not got. They made a healthy pile of cash to sit on.
Pass, but every other ship can pay the $2 million. And then they could pass through. But
and a lot of ships have passed. There's a report of 34 ships have passed the American blockade, by the way. 34.
He has to lift the blockade of Iran, this naval sea blockade that he has going on, which he has put in place because he's trying to score some sort of a win. He's desperate to find a win in all of this so that he can present himself as the strong leader.
Yes, it's politically he needs a win, and that's why even when he finally got the ceasefire, he sent his negotiators in with basically maximalist demands, like demanding a complete Iranian surrender, despite Iran having 10 times more leverage now than it did before the war started. Before the war started, we had this one threat, which was, we can go in and bomb all your leaders. We can kill your supreme leader. We had that credible threat before this war started. And it was a threat that made our position in negotiations so much stronger. But after we bombed their supreme leader, we don't have that threat anymore. We are in a weaker position negotiate. We don't even know where the new supreme leader is or if he's alive. We don't even know if he's alive for sure, the new supreme leader. It's and we, yeah.
And this is what he needs to do to get back to the table. Iran's been very clear. Just get rid of the sea blockade, and we can meet in Pakistan and figure the rest out. If Trump is willing to negotiate, if he's willing to sit down and negotiate, of course, this could all just be a way to buy time.
Yes, if Trump wanted to get out of this war, didn't care about his political future, yes, he could end this. He could make it says it wouldn't need to be as drastic as Iran's demanding. It could he'd have to give something on sanctions. He'd have to allow them to maybe do the toll on Hormuz for a while. Also about the toll on Hormuz, that wouldn't be forever because if Iran sets up a toll here, you know what everyone in the Gulf is going to do? They're going to build pipelines over to here, over to there, over anywhere, across here. It's so like 1 or 2 years, maybe 2 years, and most of the oil would no longer flow through the Gulf of Hormuz. And so they'll make big bank for those first 2 years when they can collect tolls on all these oil tankers. But after that, it'll slow to a trickle, their money from the tolls, because everything will be moving through pipelines to other coasts. And so I think, yes, allowing Iran to charge a toll is, one of the easiest demands to let them have, because it's only temporary by its nature, because pipelines will move oil in other places, so it won't be forever. And so we give ground on stuff like that, and we come to some agreement on nuclear material, and poof, it's done. The world is oil again. no more bombs flying. Problem is, compared to the deal Trump was offered at the end of negotiations, like before he bombed Supreme Leader, we're just in such a worse position. Now Iran is charging tolls. We've been forced to lift our sanctions. We've wasted huge quantities of ammunition. That's one thing we'll get into in a bit. We wasted more ammunition than even I realized. 50% of our Patriot missiles, for example. 50% of our THAAD missiles. 50% in just like a month and a half. That's crazy. Batshit insane. But, so, yes, Trump could end this war, but doing what's necessary for that, making concessions necessary, would end him politically. The damage would be so extreme. The Israel lobby would turn on him, and most of his supporters would be so disappointed already. No, it would just all be bad for him. Of course, there's no better solution, but by keeping fighting the war, he can delay the inevitable. He can pretend he's still winning for maybe a few more weeks.
Time to ramp up another strike. That's also a possibility.
Does that worry you? Do you think that it's still plausible? Because I think it's not, but people like Professor Robert Pape says, Mario, it's imminent, and a lot of people are saying that there is at least there's going to be like a massive strike by the U.S., like a final strike to declare a final win by Trump.
Look, if he doesn't lift the blockade, then Hormuz still remains closed effectively. You still have this economic catastrophe that's unfolding. If he decides to attack Iran again, then the same situation. You still have an economic catastrophe that continues to unfold. That is just getting started in many parts of the world.
Yes, just
in Asia, it's starting. In Europe, it's going to start up. In Australia, it's already started, the economic catastrophe. So, he's even if he goes for the attack option, it's not going to give him a win, and the situation is not going to change. If he keeps the blockade going, it's not going to strangle Iran. It's not going to.
No, there's no winning hand for Trump right now.
On this legislation.
Praveen, it's a pleasure to speak to you for the first time. How are you?
I'm perfectly fine. Thank you so much, Mario.
So today's an interesting day. Iran, I'm not sure if you saw the announcement, but Iran pretty much announced to the world that they control the Strait of Hormuz. They put in new rules that they require. First, they're going to be charging any ship that goes.
So Iran has formally set out rules for the Strait of Hormuz. It's beginning to organize itself.
Through a fee. So that's the toll booth they've been talking about for a while, and they've been implementing for a while. Number two, they're going to be charging an additional fee for any country that participated in the war. Number three, they're going to block any Israeli ships and any ships that belong to a country that is sanctioning Iran, which include a few Asian countries, European countries, and of course the US. And lastly, more of kind of the middle finger to the US, but they're requesting all agreements to refer to the Strait of Hormuz as the Strait of Persia. That's a pretty significant step from Iran.
I actually like the Strait of Hormuz. I'm not okay with this change. I'd much rather Strait of Hormuz. Hormuz sounds silly. I like it.
And it seems they are putting their foot down. And in the meantime, Trump quote tweeted a Washington Post article that was essentially saying that Trump doesn't really need a deal with Iran.
He does need a deal. He's fucked politically without a deal, and he's fucked with a deal too. So there's no winning situation. Let's go to some videos by Breaking Points about the state of the U.S. military. Here we go.
It's a very reductive way. Let's go to the military section now. This one is very interesting, and the response of the Trump administration is really what makes it very critical that we all pay attention. Let's put this up here on the screen. From CBS News, Iran's military is more capable than Trump administration is publicly acknowledging, sources say.
Anyone with half a brain and any observation skills knows this already. Trump says they have no more air defenses. Then we have the worst day for U.S. aircraft losses since the Vietnam War right afterwards. He says they have no navy, and then they're mining the Straits of Hormuz. Yeah, he says they have no missiles, and they keep raining missiles week after week. No, don't take anything Trump says seriously about Iranian military capabilities, because I don't know if I'm guessing that he's lying or he's completely deluded, one or the other.
Head of the Defense Intelligence Agency submitted a written statement ahead of a House Armed Services Committee hearing that says Iran can still inflict damage. Quote, Iran retains thousands of missiles and one-way attack UAVs that can threaten U.S. and partner forces throughout the region, despite degradations to its capabilities from both attrition and expenditure. So for those of you who don't know, the DIA is kind of it's like a private CIA, but for the Pentagon. So it's a very reductive way of putting it. Basically, they do military assessments on foreign governments. For intelligence purposes, all of that gets rolled up to the ODNI. Now, as part of their statutory authority, they must submit written updates to Congress by law. Remember, when the course of the war was happening, we often would get updates about troops and about the damage and about how many weapons have been expended, how many people have been wounded from updates of the Pentagon to Congress. Now, not to us, but Congress would leak it on our behalf. So I take this very, very seriously because, of course, for them, it's also a crime to lie under oath. They have to produce these reports accurately to the best of their ability and submit them to Congress, which is an independent body, which is supposed to be able to review. So that is the official statement of the Defense Intelligence Agency. And that's not even based on, oh, some anonymous source says. This is a written, on-the-record statement from the DIA to Congress. Here's how the White House reacted. Let's put this up here on the screen. The legacy
He's probably not, didn't react well.
media is doing PR for the Iranian regime again.
The truth is biased in Iran's favor. Isn't the truth mean? Trump really hates the truth. It's completely un-American. Why is the truth doing PR for the Iranian regime?
The truth is, under President Trump's leadership, the U.S. military decimated Iran's capabilities in 38 days. Their defense industrial base was destroyed. Iran's ability to build and stockpile ballistic missiles and long-range drones has been set back by years.
They did take damage. I will say that. Yes, Iran took damage, but nowhere near this. This is fiction. It's completely untrue.
The vast majority of Iran's ballistic missiles, launcher vehicles, long-range attack drones were destroyed. The Iranian Navy was annihilated with more than 150 of their ships sunk. And Iran's air forces are functionally and operationally irrelevant now. Now, again, this is, and she again says that the media is doing PR for the regime by directly quoting the Defense Intelligence Agency's assessment. And then you should partner that with some of the more recent updates about munitions. We talked a lot about that during the war. Now it's been over for a week or two, or at least we're in a ceasefire. So we have some numbers. Shall we? Let's go through the numbers. Let's put it up here. This is from CSIS and CNN.
Look at those numbers. 50% of THAAD interceptors, 50% of Patriot interceptors, 45% of precision strike missiles. Because we've been, that right there, this precision strike missiles, this number, 45%, that should tell you that we don't have air supremacy over all of Iran. Precision missiles can be fired from like hundreds of miles away and then fly to their targets. So aircrafts that dropping these bombs, like if they need to bomb Tehran up here, they just need to fly like here. And then the missile can travel the rest of the way. And that keeps our aircrafts from going deep into Iranian airspace. If Iran didn't have a functioning air defense anymore, we could just drop dumb bombs. That means our planes fly all the way into Iran and then use gravity bombs, like bombs that drop right down. Those are bigger, cheaper, and we would be using them if we could, because they are far cheaper and we have nearly unlimited amount of those. Gravity bombs, at least you don't need to worry about us running out of those. We have those for weeks. We go use those for years. But precision, we've used 45% of them because we can't fly deep into Iranian airspace because they do have air defenses. 30% of Tomahawk missiles, 20% of joint air-to-surface standoff missiles, and 20% of standoff missiles. So yes, everything that flies a distance and then bombs, we've used a lot of them.
CNN. CSIS, again, to set the table, is basically an arm of the Pentagon. They do, quote, independent analysis, but, it's basically like it's a defense industrial base think tank. And
But think how bad this is. What if we go to war with China? China is a lot stronger than Iran. If we're running through this many interceptors, Patriot interceptors, THAAD interceptors, in just a month and a half against Iran, how in the world would we last against China? that we would need to use a lot more of these. And it's a disaster. Our military deterrent in the world is weakest now than it's ever been. Not only because oh, thanks for the follow, AKB22. Nice to have you here. Our deterrent is the weakest it's been in
AKB22.
Yep. Well, it's nice to have you here, and I hope you enjoy the stream. As I was saying, our deterrence is the weakest it's been in decades, because not only have they seen what happened in Iran, that Iran, which, yes, it is a big country, has a lot of missiles, but it's not China or Russia. It's not a country the rest of the world expected us to struggle against. Yet we did. So not only is there that, but there's that we've used so much of our munitions in just this war. What happens if Russia takes this opportunity to go into the Baltic states? I've covered it in other streams, but Europe has been provoking the hell out of Russia in the last few months. There's all of the drones that are being sent deep into Russian territory are being manufactured, for example, in factories in Italy and other places, and not Ukraine. So manufacturing drones these drones in the EU, then they're fired deep into Russia's airspace and killing civilians and damaging critical infrastructure. One provocation. Two, going after the shadow fleet, just all different countries, like in Mediterranean, Italy seized a ship, Norway seized a ship, UK seized a ship. It's gone to the point where Russia is sending escorts, military escorts, to their civilian ships, so to stop them from being seized. And finally, the biggest escalation is that drones are being fired through Baltic airspaces and attacking critical infrastructure up here. This is not something that Ukraine firing through Russia could ever reach. And Belarus is an allied state, so they'd shoot the drones down too if they traveled that way. So either they're being shot like this, Ukrainian drones, and hitting infrastructure way up here. That's a very long journey, and I doubt that. Or Ukrainian drones are being launched directly from the Baltic states and shot into Russia. So you have drones made in Europe, fired from EU territory, traveling through EU airspace, going into Russia and bombing ports and oil infrastructure. That is as big a provocation as you can get. And that's why Russia recently has become very, is warning very vocally that this has to stop or there will be steps, that there are red lines and this is a red line. And if it continues, there will be retaliation. Now, you do this in context of what we just seen of the U.S. state of U.S. missile inventories. Are we equipped to, if Russia does go into Estonia, let's say Estonia does another wave of drone attacks from its territory into Russia. If Russia then goes into Estonia to set an example, to establish deterrence, to make it this stop, what are we going to do? That's a NATO state. It triggers Article 5. Do you think Trump isn't very happy with the EU right now? Do you think he's going to rush over to the EU's aid? And even if we wanted to help the EU, we have 3 aircraft carriers, all the ones we can manage already around Iran. How do we get up here? It's a complete mess. The state is, and that's not even talking about the big one over here. It's a little island off China. It's called Taiwan. We just recently moved all our interceptors, like from South Korea, our THAAD interceptors from South Korea, and to reinforce Israel. And so our air defenses in this region have just been weakened hugely by the Iran war. What happens if China decides, well, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do something finally about this little island of Taiwan? And what happens if both of those events, Russia going into Europe and Taiwan, happen at the same time while this Iran war is still going on? Oh my God. I think Trump will want NATO to step in. Well, the problem is NATO is honestly taking U.S. out of NATO, setting aside U.S. military capabilities. NATO is a paper tiger. The state of European armies is terrible. They cannot fight. Russia would crush all of Europe let's say if the U.S. said, "Okay, we're out of NATO. Europe, you're on your own." The rest of Europe versus Russia gets crushed. Absolutely crushed. Ukraine has the biggest military in Europe by far. It might have more soldiers I think maybe it might more soldiers than the rest of Europe combined, except for taking aside Turkey. Turkey actually has a military, but Turkey is more aligned with Russia. I don't think they'd step in to save Russia, the rest of the EU. But taking aside Turkey, that actually does have a military, the rest of the EU they've let their armies wither away to nothing practically. All their military budget is spent buying U.S. weapons from the military-industrial complex, and not on anything overpriced weapons, I might add. And and many of those have been already shipped to Ukraine. The military stocks of basically all of Europe have already been depleted by the Ukraine war because they've sent. Everyone's read about the tanks, the airplanes, this and that have been sent to Ukraine. Well, that is the EU's army, the military assets. It's gone now. It's already been destroyed in Ukraine. It's a mess.
They do independent, quasi-independent analysis in the open source in order to basically lobby for more weapons.
Yeah, we watched a video on the state of British Navy, the shocking state of Britain's Navy in 2026. Just watch that and apply. It's the same across all of Europe and all branches of the military. It's a bad situation. And Russia, but meanwhile, because of Ukraine and because it's under all these constant attack, it's building up. It's making more artillery shells than all of NATO combined. In 1 month, Russia makes more artillery shells than the rest of NATO makes in 1 year. That is how bad we're losing the manufacturing. As early as 2026, Russia maintains a significant advantage in artillery shell production, manufacturing roughly 3 million to 4.5 million rounds annually, often at a unit cost 10 times lower than Western equivalents. While NATO has ramped up production to over 2 million rounds per year. Okay, no, it's I'm thinking something else. There was some, but it's still, Russia is 50% to 100% more rounds per year. This is one country versus all of NATO. The advantage, and this all of NATO, that includes the United States. Take the United States out of that, and it's not even close. Russia is crushing Europe.
Whatever their agenda is. So I take their stuff actually very seriously. Most people do in Washington. Here's what
it is crazy.
The approximate.
It's Europe allowing itself to deindustrialize. If you deindustrialize, you just can't manufacture military equipment on an industrial scale anymore.
Estimate a percentage of U.S. munitions that have been expended in the Iran war. 50% of THAAD interceptors. 50% of Patriot interceptors, 45% of precision strike missiles, 30% of Tomahawk missiles, 20% of joint air-to-surface standoff missiles, and 20% of standard missiles. The single most troubling one right there is 50% of THAAD. Remember how much we talk.
THAAD are the most high-end interceptor missiles for shooting down ballistic missiles, for example. And a big problem is we've lost all our radars in the Gulf already, so we're blind, and these aren't operating at max efficiency anyway because of those lost radars. But still, these are the things you see shooting up into the sky when Iranian missiles rain down on Israel and the Gulf states. And we've used up 50% of worldwide ammunition of this type. And in Middle East states, in Israel, those stocks are almost depleted. We have to keep some of these stocks in the United States for self-defense. We're never going to give out 100% of that. We need some of it for our own defense. So it's just a complete mess.
talked about that, how important that system is for any potential war in Asia. And remember, I'm not just talking about some, preemptive war or whatever. I'm talking about Japan and South Korea, the countries which we stripped some of these THAAD interceptors out of. Remember also that we fired hundreds of them just in the 12-day war, and we only acquired.
Will be big new contracts to make them. Yes, there would. Trump is trying to set them out. There were stories about him approaching car manufacturers to try to get them to. Trump administration is in early stage talks with major U.S. automakers, including General Motors and Ford, to boost weapon production and replenish military supplies. So yes, we're looking into that. But there is a problem called rare earth, which China controls. And even if we want to build more weapons than we currently are, China is restricting supplies of rare earths. And all of our most advanced weapons, like THAAD interceptors, yes, need cobalt magnets for the radars, and then the chips need other supplies. And you have to understand about rare earths, it's not the mining of rare earths that China has a monopoly on. It's the refining. It's turning what gets taken out of the ground into usable components for our industries. That is what China has a monopoly on. They can do it cheaper and on larger scale than anyone else because of the technologies they developed to do so. And that is not, Trump has been going around trying to do a rare earth deal with Ukraine or seeing about developing it domestically. The problem isn't getting the rare earths out of the ground. There's lots of places around the world that have rare earths. The problem is right now, no matter where rare earth is mined, it's then shipped to China to be refined. And that's why it has a monopoly on rare earths. To break that monopoly, we have to develop the same technologies China has for the refining. And estimates is that's a 5-year process, 3 to 7 years, basically, somewhere in that range it would take us to set up the whole what China has and break its monopoly on rare earths. So in the short term, China just has absolute control over rare earths. Yeah, it's right now it's a strategic. It's bad planning on the U.S.'s part to have allowed that to happen at all. To allow China to have developed this technology and monopoly on the refining of those materials.
Acquired, a few dozen or so over the last 2 years. The production timeline is a disaster. Same on the Tomahawk missiles. Is we expended hundreds. We've only produced a few.
Also, we make like, how many THAAD do we make a year? It's a ridiculously low number, 96 to 400 per year. If you break that down, that's like 7 or 8 a month at the lower end. At 96, it's incredibly low. And even on the high end, we've used 400 in a day before, like at the start of this. The stockpile we had was built up over decades, these THAAD interceptors, and we've run through all that.
Dozen. There's only one facility in the United States that even makes them. There's some problems with rare earth minerals to even manufacture them. Even if we wanted to rapidly, increase production, you basically can't for a significant period of time to make sure that you were to build out more facilities. So
yeah, and even if you want to ramp up production and you had access somehow to the rare earths, you still need to build the factories or convert factories. In the automaker's case, it takes time. It's not something this Iran war, at least. Let me put it this way: the Strait of Hormuz is closed for 6 months. We basically lost already. I mean, the world economy is completely tanked by then. So, and all of these solutions to making more weapons are 6 months plus.
This has set us back. This 38-day war set the United States back probably a minimum of 5 years. And that's if we got our act together for some sort of potential future conflict. And that does not even touch the cost. With that alone, back of the napkin math, hundreds of billions in what it was cost. Not even mentioning the opportunity costs of all the actual allies that it would have been used to defend. Or what if we got hit again? 9/11. Now what? That's
or Taiwan, or if Russia goes into the Baltic states. Yes, a lot of what ifs.
The whole point is to have munitions like this. It's bad. It's really bad.
And that's why the Iranians feel so confident.
And they should.
Because they can see this report. They can see this reporting that's out there in the public of how much U.S. stockpiles have been diminished.
Yeah, and if they've used 50% in a month and a half, can we really afford to go back to a shooting war and drain off the rest of our munitions? How much of a weakened position can we afford to leave Iran? this Iran war.
and how much that has made not the U.S. so much, but our allies in the region, and ultimately Israel, which of course has their stockpiles even of these interceptors, even more diminished, have been really dependent on us. But it means that all of those Gulf Arab countries are really sitting ducks, and they were complaining during the hot war portion about how they were not getting protected the way that Israel was being protected. That dynamic would only shift more towards Iran being able to do damage. And just to go,
Yep, let's look at what's happening on the economic side.
4.2% in February. This is a good transition to talk about what we already see in terms of the economic impacts of this war. Let's put C1 up on the screen. This is from Tracy Alloway of the Odd Lots podcast, fantastic podcast.
This is going to go up higher. There's a delay between oil tankers not being able to transit Strait of Hormuz and the impact. And in March, you barely had the beginning of that impact. It's going to go much higher.
Great reporters. And she's got information here about food inflation. Costs for food companies jumped almost 8% year over year in March. That's versus 4.2% in February. This is basically just from higher fuel costs. We're still waiting for the impact of higher fertilizer, plastics, etc.
Next year is going to be bad for food prices, really bad. Because right now, 35% of the world's fertilizer went through the Strait of Hormuz. And so when Iran shut that down, right at the beginning of the planting season, like it was February, end of February, that's before any planting gets underway, so before anyone's actually using fertilizer. So the full impact of that is going to be felt in the fall when the harvest comes in. And due to fertilizer shortage, there'll be much lower yields. And food prices will go up, and there'll be riots across the world, and people will starve. That's what happens during food shortages.
So what she's saying,
and most of that, of course, will be centered in the poor countries. Remember those riots in Egypt back in 2010? That was food prices. That was because of the horrible harvest the U.S. had in 2009.
This is just the beginning. This is just when you're considering, okay, gas prices and diesel prices have gone up. That's now being reflected in costs for food companies. And of course, they're not going to just take that. They're going to pass it on to consumers. But what she's saying is that doesn't even deal with these longer term impacts like fertilizer. The higher price of fertilizer is something that farmers are shouldering right now.
Yeah, but that's next year. The food crisis, that's next year. Right now, we just need to worry about the oil and gas crisis. That also, another thing for next year is the gas crisis in Europe, heating gas. Europe is completely fucked for next winter. Already at the end of this winter, they'd had a cold winter, so their reserves of gas are lower. And you have 25% of the world's natural gas was taken offline with Qatar being shut down. And that's where Europe was getting its natural gas. And they can't get it from Russia. The next winter, they're fucked. Absolutely fucked in terms of natural gas. You're going to have riots in Europe because of that.
During planting season, that is going to mean that down the road, when those costs also get incorporated into food prices, prices are going to continue to go up. I don't feel that I even need to really explain this because we all basically lived through all of this through COVID. We saw the way that inflation.
U.S. LNG companies will enjoy it for now. The problem is, historically, this always happens, especially during election years, export restrictions. When you get near to the midterm elections, there'll be export restrictions on U.S. LNG companies. They won't be able to export. It will bring prices down in the United States, which is somewhat good, ? But Europe... Yes, the United States right now is the last place that Europe can get natural gas from until those export restrictions. And then they're just fucked because they can't get it from Russia, can't get it from Middle East, and they won't be able to get it from us. And yeah, it's bad. Yep.
And built. And that this was not something that just happens when you flip a switch. There are follow-on effects that continue even after the worst parts of the crisis are finished that take a long time to work their way through the system. So what she's saying here is we are now just starting to really see the impacts and that this is just the beginning.
Yeah.
And the impacts are delayed and they are accumulating. the Strait of Hormuz is still closed, even more closed now than it was earlier points in the war, because the United States, whatever its effectiveness, it does have this blockade, and it is shutting down some traffic. So there's even less coming through the Strait of Hormuz now than before. And if this continues, it's going to completely wreck the global economy if it continues.
I hate, there was a lot of accusations of doomerism in the beginning, but it's because, and I think anybody who's been watching the show for a long enough period, we all lived through Russia, Ukraine together.
And frankly, I 100% expect it to continue to get worse, because ultimately what needs to happen is the rest of the world comes together, twists Trump's arm, and gets him to basically do the concessions necessary to get the Strait of Hormuz open, because Trump still wants his complete Iranian surrender, because that's what he needs politically to survive. And we're nowhere near the rest of the world, like, being ready to stand up to the United States. But once things get desperate enough, like in probably 2 months, is my estimate, at that point in time, by then, not only things bad enough, but the rest of the world will start working together and say, you got to end this. And will force the United States to back off its demands and do concessions to Iran and get oil flowing again. And that's assuming there isn't a worst case that Trump, out of desperation, doesn't start bombing again. And if the entire Middle East goes up in flames, there's no oil coming for the next 3 years, and we're all fucked.
And just because things seem to be fine, they're really not. The entire global economy completely shifted. The energy markets dramatically changed. The amount of LNG, a reliance on Qatar, became dramatic. And then we got into a war with Iran, and now the Strait of Hormuz is closed. That's why we talk about, everybody seems to believe, let's say with COVID, we had the lockdowns that came in March. When did we really start to feel the supply shock? July? Maybe August? It took a while, right? Because we had just-in-time delivery.
Yeah, there's always delays. There's logistics. It doesn't happen instantly. So all these crises, they take their ways to work their way into the economy.
So there was this decent amount of stuff that was on hand. And then with closure and with the Strait, or with the shipping containers and all of those supply chain problems, we began to see shortages and problems in July and August. But the real-time inflation hit when the things started to reopen, demand was high, and the supply, it took, I would say, over a year probably from the lockdown for everything to show up. But because we lived through all of that, plus Russia, Ukraine, we have now seen the story play out multiple times. Like, you are not going to have things end overnight. However, there is a dramatic under appreciation. Gas is still $4 a gallon.
Mm-hmm.
Gas was $2.90 6 weeks ago.
$4 gas is going to look good by the end of this summer. Oh, hi, Proton Snail. Thanks for the lurk.
Diesel's like $5.20 something a gallon. Like, am I taking crazy pills? Like, when have we ever seen gas go by over $1 in a single month and then stay there with no real end in sight, to the point where the president is, bemoaning his energy secretary for saying maybe gas will have a 3 in front of it next year sometime from now. Again, just looking at the Strait, I could be wrong. I'm not an energy expert or analyst. I read some people who we trust a lot here on the show. All have basically said if the Strait remains closed for this X amount period of time, gas will hit $6 a gallon. Gas will hit $5 a gallon. That seems very likely, absent some extreme intervention on behalf of the United States. I also just look to big corporations where this stuff, same thing. It's not going to immediately affect your life, but sometime in the future, you're going to be checking.
This summer is not going to be a pleasant summer, because it's not just the gas prices. Gas prices affect a whole host of companies, and any company that's not doing well is going to go under because of this extra cost. Going to have to lay off people. And people get laid off. It has ripple effects. It affects other companies. It's called contagion for a reason. So you have people losing their jobs while gas prices explode. It's not a great combination. It's stagflation. Oh, like COVID, but in some ways worse than COVID. COVID, we weren't in this position of economic weakness to the extent that we are now going into COVID. It was, a lot of people just had a fun time during COVID. Streaming exploded, and yes, there were some tough things, but this is different. Like fuel prices didn't spike during COVID. After COVID, they went up a bit once the lockdowns were dropped, but this is going to be just people losing their jobs like crazy while prices at the everywhere explode. It's going to be stagflation, something I don't think the United States has really experienced in like 40 years. It's going to be bad.
Then the way that I went to McDonald's recently and paid $4.50 for the medium fry, you're going to be like, wait, what?
You might, even if you've heard rumors of a coup in Iran, don't believe them. Just believe in in world history. It has never, not once, has a bombing campaign ever produced regime change. It hardens, it makes people hate whoever's bombing you. Who are like the schoolgirls. Do you want to be side with the foreign enemy that's bombing schools and killing schoolgirls? No, it solidifies whatever regime is getting bombed. There's zero chance of a regime change in Iran right now. Zero.
Whenever you try to check out, let's go to the next one. Put this on the screen. The United Airlines CEO has now come out and say fares may need to rise by 20% to offset the fuel charge, jet fuel costs. Quote, signaling.
Yeah, that is reasonable. Airlines, they go under if they don't increase prices.
A significant test of consumer willingness to absorb higher fare as the industry grapples with volatile oil prices.
There was a production policy to shut down stream in many places to protect the industry, save oil while rising costs. Yes, because so much of our economy shut down because of COVID. They did things like cut production. Yes, but even with that, for a brief while, oil prices really plunged during COVID, even with those production cuts.
This was on their earnings calls. He said, United is aiming to recover the full increase in fuel costs as quickly as possible and expects to move toward a 100% pass-through. God, don't you love corporate speak? A 100% pass-through as it targets double-digit pre-tax margins next year. What does that mean? So again, corporate speak. Yields need to increase by 15 to 20%. Whatever.
How are the U.S. oil markets looking, those production chains going? Any ramping up in the past couple of years? There's not any flood of new oil production coming online. The oil prices were at very low, like in the 60s, whatever. You had all this Russian oil being traded even lower than that because of sanctions. And when prices are that low, there's no exploration, no tapping well. It's a lot of the untapped oil reserves are like in deep water. For example, Venezuela. Tons of oil here, biggest, I think, oil reserve in the world, all in deep water. And other places in the Arctic, under Russian control, but again, because of sanctions, that's not getting developed. So there's no production coming online that's going to save us. We could, I think, rather than we're hoping for production to come online, we should be praying that the oil infrastructure we have in the Gulf doesn't get damaged further by an escalation, because that's the real danger. We go in and do what Trump threatens of destroying civilization, we lose all of this area, all the oil from this area permanently for like 3 to 5 years. And there's nothing that can replace that in those 3 to 5 years. Afterwards, a lot of stuff will come online, but in the short term, it'll be an absolute disaster.
Whenever it comes to that means what? That means your ticket price is going to go up by one.
That's true. The United States is at peak production for the last few years to fight this effect, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, it's now that prices are higher in some areas, in some very limited places, some production will come online because it becomes profitable to pump at this level. But let me put it, one problem we have is this in terms of production. And bring production back online, oil prices. We still have the markets telling us that, oh, this Hormuz thing, it'll be over soon, and oil prices will fall. That's what the futures are saying, the signal. It's not the right signal, but they're telling us that oil prices will come down. And when you're looking to develop or expand production of oil, what the future price of oil is what's important, because it takes time. It's what oil is in 6 months that matters. And if oil in 6 months is trading even lower than this, like $70 a barrel, well, that $70 barrel, tons of places aren't profitable at that. Once the futures start going up and you have the future price of oil at 150, then you'll start to see some investment and And you might bring some in 6 months, some more production might become online. But right now, you don't even have much investment going on in oil because they're still worried that the crisis will end and oil prices will crash, or not crash, will at least go down a lot.
1/5.
Every cost increase for
And because that's what financial markets are signaling. And they're signaling that because of heavy U.S. intervention to avoid all types of, to avoid the stock market crashing. That's the simplest answer. Because if you had 150 oil in the futures market right now, you wouldn't be having the Dow hitting records and stuff like that.
for them,
We'll go
they're
to
passing
you.
directly to you and potentially an increase above and beyond that. I mean, that's what we saw the last time there's a huge inflationary spike, is the corporations, oh, I can get away with raising my prices even beyond the cost of the increase in inputs. Of course, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And so that's why you have corporate profits as a share of the economy that continue to be at all-time highs, even as costs go up, because they've taken advantage of that dynamic. And of course, they'll do the same thing again.
Totally. And yeah, let's just do like back of the napkin stuff. Most people take some small vacation in the summer statistically. And let's even put aside Europe. You're already upper middle class if you can afford to do that. Let's just say here in the US, you want to go to Disney. Oh, by the way, Disney prices are very high. But let's
Oh, Disney prices, don't go to Disney. It's insane.
say you got to get to Disney. So let's say family of 4, it was going to cost you $600 a person. If you're flying from California, whatever, Midwest, $500, something like that. Now it's $750 per person. And you're like, oh, okay, well, that's a lot of money, right? And so then you have the increased jet fuel costs. Oh, and then you need to do a rental car. Oh, well, the rental car cost has gone up too because of gas and because of increased insurance. And then, oh, the Disney cost has also gone up because they have all this energy.
Yeah, everything is going up hugely. It's still people less vacationing this summer because of it.
Input and stuff that they have. I mean, this is craziness. And that's just vacation. That's the easiest thing.
And your
to be
budgets
able
are
Well, I agree that it will have very little effect. We're talking 1/4 of the global oil market. Yeah, but I'm thinking there are some places like fracking. Everything's a cost-benefit analysis in oil. And how much does it take to get the oil out of the ground? Some places it's extremely cheap. Some places extraordinarily expensive. So like deep water wells, whether it's in Venezuela or off the coast of Texas, and you need to have a certain oil price for it to be worth investing in that. And when you have low oil prices like we've had for the last few years, there just isn't that much investment. And even right now, with the Strait of Hormuz closed, as long as the prospect of the war ending, and as long as future markets are giving signals that it might all be over soon, there's not going to be investment in new fracking or other things. So if the futures market were high right now, at least in 6 months, there would be some new production coming online. But we're not even having that.
already been stretched at home because of
Yes.
increased gas prices and increased food prices, so things are tighter to begin with. Yeah, you're just going to say, we can't do it this year.
Right.
We'll go somewhere
We'll go
local.
next year.
We'll drive to the lake here instead of
And
trying to
even
do
when
a
you
big
do
Disney
drive,
trip.
it's going to cost more. All right, so then let's put the next one up here. Lufthansa. Lufthansa has now cut 20,000 flights to save fuel from the Iran war fallout. Quote, global jet fuel prices have now jumped 70% since the start, pressuring airlines in Europe. The largest consumer of jet fuel now shipped through.
Yes, because the crisis in jet fuel is, of course, centered around Iran. And so it's Asia, Europe, Africa. United States is, at least in terms of jet fuel, more isolated from that. And so domestic flights won't have as much of a problem. But any airline that takes off, for example, from New York and goes to Europe, on the way back, they need to get their jet fuel from Europe. And that's a problem.
The Strait of Hormuz. Lufthansa says it will cut 20,000 flights over the next 6 months to save jet fuel as the pressure builds on the company to address surging prices. The airline said Tuesday it had already announced which flights it had trimmed through May, so this is just in the next month or two of the 20,000 that they're cutting. And overall, that the cuts would save 40,000 metric tons of jet fuel through the end of October. So basically what that means is that they're going to have to cut any of the lesser demand, routes. It's over. So yeah, if you're flying to...
Huge profit for the companies that are capable to still pump. Chevron, Exxon, they are okay with $55 a barrel. I wonder what will happen when they start signing contracts in the current prices. Yep, right up until any export restriction, they're going to make bank. And even when there's export restrictions, that only applies to U.S. production. They have oil wells around the world, so they will still be making bank. Just it will hurt their profits in the U.S. sector if there's oil restrictions. But yeah, no, it's a good time to be. If you owned oil stocks going into this Iran war, you made bank.
Smolensk or something, you better drive, I
Yeah.
guess. And the head of the International Energy Agency had already said last week Europe has exactly 6 weeks of jet fuel supplies left, and they're already meeting on Tuesday to discuss the energy crisis. So likely, I mean, I could be wrong. I'm guessing, just thinking about the intersection of business and
One thing about ramping up production, you know that all the oil that's being released from strategic reserves, that's going to need to be replaced. And where do you think they get that replacement from? The oil markets. They may delay that replacement, but what I mean is we're not going to see $60, $70 oil for a while now, because once oil goes down to that levels, you're going to have, when it finally does, which might be a while, you have governments that'll have to start stocking up. And so we're not going to see $3 gas for a long time.
government in Europe it's almost certain that the German government was like, look, guys.
The last ship was, I think, the 20th. So what are we today? So the last ship, I think, is arrived by now. We all the ships are out now, I believe.
This is all going to get cut. They're like, this is a national, a national crisis. X amount of, you need to save 40,000 metric tons to give us some runway. Any flight which is even remotely unprofitable, it's got to go, like immediately. And then all the fuel fare prices, they have to go up. Another thing we really haven't grappled with is the Gulf. If hostilities resume, I mean, that is a massive amount of air traffic that can no longer move through. Dubai was one of the busiest airports in the world.
That's right.
Like millions of people flew through there. So that means almost especially.
One reason Dubai was such a busy place is its location, between east and west, but also because for some reason, air fuel extremely cheap here in the Gulf for some reason. So the airlines, if you had a connecting flight going from Australia to the United States or something, airlines can fly here, get really cheap jet fuel, and then fly out. Of course, the cheap jet fuel is somewhat true still, although it's going up because of the crisis. When missiles are flying, you can't have flights.
Especially here in America, a lot of the way that people were going to Asian destinations was via Doha, via Dubai, and via Abu Dhabi. Now they would have to fly via Europe, which is already strained and having to cut flights. You could just see an escalation here where unless you got to go for business purposes and you really got to go, you're just not going to go.
Yeah. Well, and here at home, the weakest players are already collapsing. We can put C4 up on the screen, and it looks like our government's going to bail out.
Yeah, I heard that. Trump was rescuing Spirit Airlines. And Trump administration basically is the cause for Spirit Airlines being in trouble. When you have airlines that sell their tickets for dirt cheap, that try to compete for the cheapest airfares, they're the ones who are most vulnerable to fuel increase, to the increase in fuel price.
Spirit Airlines by buying a stake in it. So this is the latest company that the Trump administration is considering taking a stake in. And so here the headline is Trump administration nearing rescue deal for Spirit Airlines. Signaled this week the government could help the discount carrier, which has struggled with surging jet fuel prices. Trump administration nearing a rescue deal. They're struggling to survive during a run-up in jet fuel prices. Now, they had some issues that predated this, but this is like the thing that is really pushing them over the edge.
No, that's what I said. Weak companies will go under when fuel prices go up because this is one huge unexpected cost that they can't absorb and they need a bailout. Now, for huge companies like Spirit, you might have the Trump administration come in and rescue them. But for mid-sized companies, that's not happening. They're just going under and firing everyone. Yeah, I keep telling my husband to buy gold or something, and he hasn't done it yet. He has liquid, not in stock market, but yeah. Oh, lovely. More corporate bailouts. I do think that's a shame. Some bailouts might be justified. Honestly, Trump directly torpedoed Spirit Airlines when they started this Iran war. There are bailouts like during the financial crisis in 2008 that weren't great. Banks going under because of their own bad decisions, but Spirit Airlines going under because of the Iran war. Yeah, this particular bailout. Not great, but I mean, you broke it, you fix it. I'd feel bad for all people working for Spirit Airlines if it went under because of Iran.
Under the agreement being discussed, U.S. government would loan the embattled discount carrier as much as $500 million, receiving in return warrants to take a potential significant stake in Spirit. People familiar with the matter said the investment could help keep Spirit afloat as it seeks to emerge from its second recent bankruptcy filing. So now our government is basically creating distressed assets because of our insane policy and decision to get into this war, and then buying up parts of those distressed assets.
Yes, I don't think the U.S. taxpayer is doing it for profit reasons, but it's all retarded.
So congratulations, American people. You're about to be a proud owner of a portion of Spirit Airlines, very possibly.
I don't hate
Yay.
it. Is that a bad thing to say? I like it.
Well, here's the thing is
Spirit.
Yeah, it's the same as me. Yeah, Spirit Airlines, I have no bad opinion of Spirit Airlines. They just try to do cheap airline tickets. And it wasn't their bad decisions that got them in this latest bad situation. It was, so yeah, I am sympathetic for them.
Spirit is a very, look, I hate Spirit. I hate flying it. It is still is a very important part of U.S. air travel, which is the extreme budget airlines for the hyper infrequent traveler.
Yeah.
Who just
Exactly. The poorest of us that just want to get where they need to go. And Spirit offers, I think I might have booked a travel on Spirit once or twice when I'm just looking for the cheapest ticket.
needs to
look. I like the
fly once a
precedent
year.
of
Yeah.
government owning key assets.
Yeah, me too.
I like the seizing the means of the production. So if it's the Trump administration is going to pay the role. I mean, the part of it that's like preposterous and not good is the fact that it is the Trump administration policy itself that has in large part created these problems for Spirit Airlines, and obviously just another sign.
Yeah, air fuel is up like 250% or something. It's crazy increase, and most of the cost, like of a Spirit flight, of any airline flight, is the fuel.
Of like how dire things are for the airline industry in particular.
It's a little complicated. Basically, what they say, Spirit Airlines would be on firmer financial footing had the Biden administration not blocked the airline's merger with JetBlue. Remember, they were supposed to merge with JetBlue. It was blocked by antitrust because of worries about budget consolidation. Now that, yeah, it really, look, like, do I trust Trump and all these people to fix it? No, not really. But I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to keep a critical airline, which, it serves those budget customers.
Yeah, Israel was threatening to start this war without us. Thing is, what is correct is Iran would have responded by attacking all U.S. bases around the region, because Israel would never attack Iran without U.S. permission. Even if we didn't join the attack, Israel it would make sure the U.S. was okay with it before attacking Iran first, and Iran knows this. So of course they would have done exactly what they did during this Iran war and attack all our bases. So if we're not willing to say no to Israel and say don't attack Iran, then yes, we have to join. The correct answer was to say no to Israel. But if you can't do that, just letting Israel attack on its own doesn't help us at all. We get dragged into this anyway. We have to tell Israel no or join them.
And
it's better than letting it go
bears down. Yeah, I mean,
what would be even better is to not have done the war. Yeah,
yeah, of course. Again, let's all be fair. Like, they've been in Chapter 11 for like years. Airlines itself, I don't even really know how they make money. Actually, I do. It's from credit cards. But in terms of actually flying, I still don't really.
Well, and not just from credit cards, it's from like financial speculation. Like a lot of the larger airlines in particular, as much like financial entities, like trading as.
Gambling has become such a big part of our economy lately. Our financial system, like. Even like gambling sites sponsoring CNN. It's insane. And all that gambling, that type of gambling, like on real events, there's going to be manipulation. If you gamble on an election outcome, well, the politicians, there's nothing preventing them from gambling and betting against themselves if they know a scandal is about to break. Or it's never going to be the average person that wins. It's another reason why the richest 1%, which are connected and know stuff other people don't, get richer, is through this gambling. And everyone else gets poorer.
As they are hedge funds, as they are actually airlines.
Yeah, I remember reading once, it was like half of the profits or something from American come from freaks like me who are always gaining airline miles from all the swipe fees, from people who use their credit cards for frequent flyer miles. Like a significant portion of their profit only comes from credit card swipe fees, which is kind of crazy.
That's why they push it so hard.
Right, that's why every time you're on a plane, they're like, you get 25,000 more miles if you sign up right now. I always want to be like, who's doing that? You're signing up for a credit card on an airplane? That's kind of crazy. No? Maybe it's just me. That's not
somebody's.
No, I know some people that are huge, all about getting miles. And I'm sure it works for some people.
Doing it?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, it
we're
works. Yeah.
Continuing. Let's go and put C6 up on the screen here. Here's one more impact that we're facing now. Aluminum faces a black swan supply shock, according to this analysis.
Basically, every commodity right now is facing a black swan supply shock, like fertilizer, food, oil, gas, metals too, like ammonia, sulfuric acid. One of the things that come out of the Gulf in big quantities is used in mining. And so all of this, the Gulf crisis doesn't impact mining too. I think this, I mean, the only thing that isn't maybe directly impacted by the Iranian war would be gold, since most of the gold that exists is already outside of the ground. It's not, let me put it this way, it's gold supply is increasing like at like 1% rate or 0.5% rate globally. So it's, but gold is going to go up for other reasons, because it's the ultimate crisis hedge, and we're heading into a crisis.
This is, of course, due to the war in Iran's triggered a supply shock that will lead to major shortages this year. The Middle East accounts apparently for about 7 million metric tons.
Well, sulfuric acid, useful for dissolving organic matter too.
Tons of annual aluminum smelting capacity, roughly 9% of the estimated global supply this year. It's a key material for transport, construction, and packaging industries. So you're talking aircraft, actually, is one of the things that needs aluminum, significant amounts of aluminum. You're talking about automobiles. U.S. has, some domestic capacity, so we're probably somewhat sheltered from this particular impact, but obviously it's going to push up the prices, and then that flows through to consumers in all sorts of ways. I think China is the biggest producer of aluminum, but the Middle Eastern region, again, you learn new things in war about where things are made and what they go into and how critical they are to day-to-day life and how much people suffer.
Desalination plants in the Middle East might be stocking up as well for supply issues. Well, I'm sure they've stored up all the water they can in the Middle East, but desalination plants go offline for several months, especially during the summer. Then it's game over. People have to be evacuated. Even more if the power goes out, because there it's unlivable. I mean, you have like it's 120 degrees outside, like 125 degrees outside in like Saudi Arabia, but yet you have to understand inside it's hotter. It's always hotter in those places where you have the sun beaming down because of greenhouse. You're talking like 150 degrees inside buildings. You actually temperatures where you can cook food. No, yeah. If they lose power, there's going to be a massive evacuation of civilians, of everyone from the Middle East. Unless you have generators and your own huge supply of water, there's no point in staying.
For when the flow of those goods stops.
Mm-hmm. Well, we will
Solar oven, yep.
continue to track it. It's the worst energy crisis literally in modern history, and coupled with the Strait of Hormuz news that we just went through, I don't see a way where we are not going to have rampant and persistent high supply side inflation. Now, as you said,
Exactly. Unavoidable. Absolutely unavoidable. The prices will have to be passed on, and we'll be dealing with high prices for a while, because I don't think this is ending anytime soon. Trump, as long as Trump is talking about how he's winning in Iran, there's no hope of this ending, of a good outcome, because that means he isn't willing to do concessions to Iran yet, and so the Strait of Hormuz will remain closed. And that's the reality. Anyway, this will be on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Come watch on Kick or Twitch, and I'll see you next video. Bye.